start making the video. I'm going to do a mixture of this one and the one with the brick. I'm going to do the one with the brick to kind of show how I do the brick, because it's kind of a little more involved, so I kind of want to show that. But I do kind of like having the overhang on this one. Now I'm not going to do the extent of, you know, all this right here. Sorry, my prop thing is actually still on. So I'm not going to go to the extent of having this much overhang on it. But I do want a little more overhang than what is essentially on this one. So I'm going to do kind of a mixture of this one and that one right there. I'm going to get started. Okay, before every build, I usually kind of make myself a rough sketch. I mean, you don't have to be all fancy with it and all that kind of stuff, but this kind of gives me an idea of what direction I want to go as far as how tall I want it to be at the peak, which I'm going 60, which is going to be 5 feet, 4 feet after the roof pitches down. So I'll have a 1 foot pitch. Now after I draw it out on my actual foam, you know, I might change this to maybe 52. So maybe I don't have such a drastic slope, but I kind of like the larger slopes. They kind of, I don't know, they kind of look a little more, you know, they kind of give them like a more taller appearance. Because you got to remember when you're building these things, especially if it's, you know, for like a little yard haunt or something like that, you know, your audience is going to be, you know, little kids, you know, for trick-or-treating and stuff. So a 5 foot, you know, concrete looking structure is going to look really tall to them anyways. So, you know, and the more pitch you put on it, the more illusion they kind of have to them. So I kind of like giving a little more pitch to them that way. And then I'm going to do a 6-inch on each side. That's the part that's going to be bumped out. Then the brick is going to be in this section right here, and I'm going to give just a subtle crown to it, you know, and that's going to make it look like, you know, that's where the stucco is, and, you know, the brick is going to be inside here. I might put a base down here, just to make it look like, you know, like there's actually like something on the bottom, and then the brick was all laid on top of it. Now the styrofoams, there's a couple different kinds you can get. You can get this style right here that has a foil on both sides, you know, and then you have your styrofoam in the middle, and then you have this kind right here. Each one of them, you know, a lot of times this could be pink, sometimes you'll find it in blue, depending on who you get it from. I know, unless I find a distributor somewhere here in Florida, I have a hard time finding the thicker stuff, the stuff that's 2 inches, which is really nice to work with. But like, you know, the simple 1 inch, you know, you can pretty much pick up at any hardware store. Each one of them have good qualities to them. Those are actually the best to use for building mausoleums and stuff like that. They hold up a little bit better, you know, outside, especially if you plan on using it for multiple seasons and stuff like that. The downside to them is, since they are, you know, foam and there's nothing on them, when you paint them, the paint tends to sometimes bleed into them, so it takes a little bit longer to paint them sometimes. But they do work really well, and, you know, they don't have anything on them as far as foils and all that stuff that can flake off or anything like that. So, like, that stuff is really good to use, but it's also a little bit more expensive than, you know, that stuff right there. This stuff right here is good for, it paints quickly, because with the foil on here, it doesn't take much to paint. You know, they paint really quickly. The paint will stick right to them, no problem. The downside to this kind is if you peel that foil off and you leave it outside, without the structure of the foil on both sides, it will tend to buckle, it'll bow, especially like in the heat, like if it's in direct sunlight. So if you have it sitting out there in your front yard and you don't put some kind of like reinforcement on behind it, which when I go to do this, since I'm going to do the brick, I'm going to be peeling it off with a brick set. So I'm going to be gluing a couple pieces of 1x2s to the backside as ribs, so I don't get that buckle. As I've had it happen in the past, that's why I'm going to show you. I'll tape, a marker to just a straight edge. So what I want to do is I want to try to make that radius as symmetrical as possible. Alright, I got the basic drawing laid out. You can see I did that border on the bottom like I was talking about. I got my 6-inch sides on the other side. I got my radius right here. And then you can see where I got my roof is going to be at 4 feet. Then it's going to go to the 5 feet. Now, since I'm doing the brick on this one, the only thing I got to cut out really is just the roof itself. After I cut that out, everything else is pretty much going to stay put. Then I'm going to show how I do my brick. I always do the brick before I do anything else, because it's much easier that way. And then after I do that, then I'm going to flip it over, and then that's where my 1x2 is going to come into play. I'm going to put 1x2s, I'm going to glue them to the back side of this first before I do anything else. So this way, because I'm going to run nails, like roofing nails or screws with washers along the perimeters. So this way it helps make sure that those don't fall off. And then those will be hidden behind all the rest of the trim that's going to go on there, so this way you don't see those fasteners. So once I get this all cut out, I'll get started on the brick and show you that part. Now all I use to cut my stuff out is I just pick up these cheap kitchen knives, dollar store special stuff, because you're going to dull them out anyways, depending on what you're working on. If you're working on a nice wood table, it might last a little longer. But I'm dragging these against my concrete floor, so I'm constantly having to resharpen them. So I just buy these nice little, Dollar Tree specials, Dollar General. Now to do my brick, all I use just a router like this, and I just took a regular drill bit and just cut it all flat. And now you also got to keep in mind that that foam board is only 3/4 of an inch thick, that the stuff with the foil on there. So you don't want this bit no more than maybe 3/8 of an inch, because you don't want to cut all the way through, because then you're going to weaken it. You want to just give it just enough so we can make your lines and make the brick stand out and make it obvious. So I'll show you how I do this. Now essentially what I do to make my brick is I just take a level, I turn it up on end, and then I use that router, and then as I cut my line on here, then when I move the level, I essentially move the level to where it sits on that line each time. So this way I'm only creating so much gap in between, for the thickness of this, and that's what I can make my brick. Now if you want to do something that's more like a block size, then you can always lay it on its side or get a little bit bigger, and I'll put your lines further apart. But this is going to make it where you have nice straight lines, and it'll look a little bit more convincing than if your lines are kind of waving like that. The next step of this process is your verticals. Now, what I like to do is I like to try to make it as simple as possible. Since I always use 48 inches as my overall, because it's a nice even number. Plus, also the sheets only come 48, so you can maximize, how much you get out of a sheet. By taking off 6 inches on either side, it leaves me 36 in the center. So I just figure 36. I just round everything, to a number that sounds like it might be a good size number, and I found 6 6 inches seems to look the best. So you can go 4 inches if you want, but I do 6, because 6 inches really is only from this point to this point, so it's really not that big, you know, when you think about the span of this whole thing. Now what I do is, on my very bottom row, I do every 3, because you got to think, you know, your bricks are going to be staggered. So say this is a brick, the next one's going to be here, and it's going to stagger like this for your brick look. So what I do is I do my bottom grid at 3 inches, and then I come towards the top, and I'll start whatever row I want to start at my 6. So then I do my 6, 12, 18, 24, so on and so on. And then the next one, where I got to have my stagger, obviously I'm going to do 3. So I'm just going to measure 3 over from here, and then what I'll do is, just to make things easier, either I'll put the tape measure right here, so my next one will be 6, 12 again, so you keep your measurements the same, or I'll move the tape measure over and put my 6 here and go 6, 12 that way. So this way I can keep them consistent. And the other thing is, while you're blowing out the grooves, if you hold the blowgun at just the right angle, you can essentially use it to help blow the paper off. So you're going to start exposing your brick. But the one thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take like a razor blade and just go around your perimeter line just enough to cut through the foil. You know, so this way when the air blows it, it's only pulling that up, and it's not actually like pulling up the section that you don't want to pull up. Now at this point, you can start to see that your mausoleum is starting to take shape. You got the brick. And what's kind of cool about this kind right here with the foam on it, or the foil I mean, when you tear that foil off, you can see it automatically makes like a nice coarse look for your brick. So you don't have to sit there and really age the brick or anything like that. And even some areas where, you know, the blowgun kind of blew a pot, you know, a little spot right there out. So you can see like the kind with the foil on it and doing brick kind of works out really good, because it gives you a nice look to begin with. Now there's a couple different ways people do brick. I've seen people rip little strips, you know, thin little strips, and they just glue them in place. You know, to be honest with you, that's pretty much just about as much work as doing it this way. The only other way that makes it easier is the fact that you can just feed it through a table saw and just, you know, slice it. This way you have to take your time and stay on your lines, but it's about the same amount of work in both directions. But this way, you know, you're still using that same one piece, and you haven't wasted any more of your extra material yet. And this is where you're going to hit your first dead end in the road, where you're going to have to wait, is unless you can find a glue or something that dries super quick. I always anchor wood to the back side of my props, right on the edge, all the way around the whole prop. And what I do is I put caulking behind it, and then I'll flip it over after it's dry, and then I'll run some either roofing nails or something with a washer on it to help lock it in place. So this way those pieces stay intact on there. Because at this point, if say this prop is only going to be a prop that's going to be sort of maybe close to a wall and no one's going to see the back side of it, now you can run stakes in the ground and screw the stakes into the wood right there, and that'll help hold your prop up. Or if you're going to do like what I'm going to do, where I'm going to make it 2 feet deep, now I can put L brackets in the corners, and I can finish the rest of my framing and then cover it from that point. All right, it's that overnight. I've already flipped it over and just ran nails in them. There's just kind of just like roofing nails or drywall nails, however you want to put it, you know. And the reason I put the caulking on the back side of it, even though I'm nailing it, is just to have a little bit more bond between the wood and the back of that foam. So this way, if say we got a really bad windstorm or something like that, I don't have to worry about it trying to pull itself off the nails. It has a little bit more, you know, it's secured better, plus the nails help. Okay, I've kind of got started just to kind of show you kind of what, you know, the overall plan is going to be, where that part steps out and you got the little ledge there. Now what I do is let me see if I can position this for you if you guys see it just fine. I use this kind of caulking right here. I pick it up from Home Depot. It's made by Loctite. It's a PL300. It's for foam board. It's a construction adhesive. That's what I've used on quite a few of my props, and it bonds, it holds pretty good. I mean, if you're really, you know, got a really nasty storm or something like that, I mean, there's not a whole lot that's really going to hold styrofoam together, but this works really well, and I've had pretty good luck with it. But what I do is I just take my strips, on there, and what I do is I get like just like regular like nails. What I use the nails for is kind of like on the back piece, it just adds a little extra reinforcement. And what I do is when I put the nails in, I put them at an angle like this. I shove them below the surface, and then what I'll do is I'll take caulking, I'll just smear a little caulking over that, and before I paint it, and it kind of hides them. But shoving them in at an angle like that gives it more of a, you know, less harder to pull straight off. Now, if I just ran it straight in, they pull apart much easier. So run them in, shove them below the surface. And you can get, I mean, you can put a lot on here, you can put a little on here, just depends on, you know, what you want to do. I put a fair amount on there. I try not to get too much, because once you push down on this and you're pushing those nails in, it's going to smear inside there anyways. As you can see. All over me. Now, if you're building like something that you wanted to take a little more time with, you could always run this stuff to a table saw, 45 your angles, so when they come together, they have a nice little, you know, nice corner, so you don't see the foam like this. But once you paint it and you put all your dry lock or the method that I'm going to use over all this stuff, it all blends right in. You don't really see it anyways. I mean, if someone's looking close enough, they could, you know, they would notice the difference. But I don't sweat too much over that, because I look at it as these are kind of meant to be seen in the dark, anyways, up close. You know, because that's usually when trick-or-treaters are out, and that's usually when your yard display is usually really being used, is at nighttime with all the lights and stuff on it. So no one's really going to be coming up to these things close enough to really look at that in the middle of the day. It's unlikely. And all I do on this part, now because I put the piece of wood on the bottom here, I wiggle on the camera a little bit there. I took a drill and I drilled 4 holes through there so I can shove the nails through. Now, unfortunately, my nails are not going to be at an angle on this part. I just have to deal with the fact that, you know, the caulking is going to have to do the bulk of the work. But when I run the nails on this part, they'll go at the angle. And I said, I got to do this bottom side. But I line it up with the edge of where my brick was cut, because you want to make it look like the brick is kind of behind it. And then this way, you just kind of got to do it by eye and push the nails through, and hopefully you don't pop it out the side. Even if you do, you can pull it back out. Once you paint it, put your stuff on there, you're gonna be able to hide it anyways. So it's not like a critical thing. You didn't destroy your prop just because the nail kind of popped out the side. You know, it's really not that big of a deal. It just means you have to do a little extra caulking in that spot. That's all. I'm trying to push this over a little bit. And sometimes I'll push it through slow, and if I happen to see, like right there, I kind of saw where it was a little too close to the edge. Now I'll just move it over a little bit. And I'm getting ready to start work on this section. Now, obviously, I don't want that much recess inside there. You know, I want this to be a little, you know, I want probably this section to be about the depth of this. So what I'm doing is I just took an extra piece, and I just laid it on here. You know, then went on the bottom side and I traced, you know, the shape of the roof. But you want to make sure that that doesn't interfere with your roof pieces. So then what I do is I take just a piece of my extra foam board, I'll put it on my line, and I'll draw it on the back side. And what that'll do is that'll make it to where it's the exact size that when I go and put it in here and I put the roof piece on, everything will line right, it'll fit right inside here like I want it to. Alright, the next part that I'm doing is I'm getting ready to set that piece. Now what I did is I took just a drywall square, and I ripped myself a bunch of essentially spacer blocks, because I want to make sure this piece stays consistent, and I want to be able to have something I can press it down to, so when I put all my nails and all that stuff into it, I don't want it to be, you know, wavy like this. So you see I put it on here, and then I put some dabs of caulking, and I'll just take this piece and it'll just set right inside here. Obviously these can be adjusted, I can move these around wherever I need them, but that'll give me something to where I can push this down tight and then put my nails in, and then the roof piece will sit right in this area. So I'm going to start working on that. Okay, so I got that piece on. You see by putting the stoppers on there, I was able to push this down. You see where the roof, I just, when they come to the ends, I just kind of hold it here and just eyeball it with my knife. Even though it's a little off, I can shave that a little bit once the caulking's dry. You know, and the same thing over here. Just run it to the edge, pinch it down, you know, nice and tight. I have a few nails going through here, so it goes through kind of all three layers. It's going through this one, and into this one. So this way it's kind of bonding all these corners together. So this way it makes the corners, you know, extra strong. And then what I'll end up doing after is, this is just a little excess, but I end up caulking all my seams, which also helps increase the overall strength of the prop, because you're, you know, gluing all the exterior seams together. The next is just these two pieces for right here, which is my base piece, which is going to be a two-part, and then the upper piece. And then at that point, other than just, you know, trying to decide what direction I want to go, if I want to do like any kind of bevels, or maybe like areas like maybe over here, maybe take some of the styrofoam off and, you know, give it like the look like maybe some of it broke off and you see the brick behind it and that kind of stuff. So once I get these last couple pieces on, then I just got to make that decision if I want to do any extra detail, or if I'm going to be ready to get ready to start building the back half of it and then get ready for paint. Alright, I got everything glued together, got my bottom piece on. You can see where I've gone over the nail heads, and like I said, this doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, because by the time you paint your dry lock or whatever you're going to do to kind of make it look like stone, you know, the little roughness isn't going to affect anything. You know, you see I got it all caulked. Now a little trick for like these corners is I just take like a piece of wood cedar shim, just cut it to the shape, and I'll let it get, you know, right inside there, and you can just tool it right out. You know, so this way you can get that caulking all the way into that corner. You know, just a little trick right there. Now the next part is to decide what you're going to do up there. Now, because you don't really want to just leave this blank. So you know, how these little cheap ones are like from, you know, the Dollar Tree. They're, you know, they're good because they're cheap, and if you cut them up, you don't really care too much. Now I could do like where I could cut it here and just have the RIP with this little scroll work sitting up here. Or I've already measured my my height, and I could cut it just below the skull and crossbones, and just curve this right here, and I can put just this section right in here. But to kind of fit with the kind of like the whole rest in peace kind of thing, I'm going to go with this top section. So I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut it here, put a little caulk on the back, center it, stick it right in. Okay, pretty much at this point now, and if you weren't gonna say build it out, 2 feet or 3 feet, 4 feet, how big you want to make it, and this is just gonna be kind of like in the distance or something like that, where you're only gonna see the face here. You're pretty much at this point now where you could throw some stakes in the ground, screw them to the blocks that we put in the back, get it all painted, put some lights on it, and you're pretty much ready to go. The one thing I wanted to show, what I meant by doing bevels is, like right now it's all just, like this one's just all just square corners, no detail really to them. On a lot of them, what I'll do is I'll take my table saw and I'll feed my foam through it and make like a kind of like a little wedge, like a little triangle piece. And like up here, let's say you can stick that right here, and that kind of gives you that kind of like that little detail to it. And then you could always 45 this corner and run it back here and then straight across, so you kind of give yourself like a nice little bead detail or a cove detail kind of deal across all the lower sections. You could run it across the top section up here, just to kind of give it that little extra detail, that little extra to it, to make it look a little bit more fancy. For the purpose of this video, I'm not gonna go through all that, but I just wanted to show what I meant by when I say doing a bevel. You could even put the bevels here, so it looks like it bevels back into the brick if you wanted to. You can put it right here, all kinds of stuff. I mean, you can do all kinds of things like that, or you can rip little small squares, like squares about the half the size of your 3/4, and put those here. So then you end up with a flat edge, and then it'll recess back, and another flat edge, and recess back. So it'll kind of give you like a stair step kind of effect to it. You can go that route too. So there's all kinds of little things you could do to kind of give it like a little more personality, a little more character to it. But for the demonstration for this video, I'm not going to go through all that. I just want to describe that purpose. So, and thank you for watching. Alright, getting ready to start the back of the framing. I did make a small goof up earlier. Normally, when I'm making these pieces that go on here, I also make the back half at the same time. So this way, because they got to be the same size for it to look symmetrical. So I kind of goofed up there. Normally I'll do that before I put all this stuff on, so I can still lay it nice and flat like it was. But I kind of skipped that step. So luckily I have this table right here, so I can lay it on here, so I ain't gonna worry about this being on the table and damaging it. So I'm just gonna get all my my pieces cut real fast, and I'll get ready to screw them together, and I'll start showing how I make the back half. Okay, here's the not so fun part. Now I have this arranged in the same configuration as the prop. Now sometimes I'll take the time to drill a hole and screw them together, or sometimes I'll just take a block and I'll shoot it down with a small staple. I just have one of these, just a simple, it's a combination brad nailer / stapler from Hard Freight. They're pretty cheap. I have I think I'm running probably like a 1/2 inch staple. And just, one thing I like to do, just because it kind of helps bond things together, help things stay together, is I put a little caulk on there. Alright, now that's all together. I don't worry about the ends hanging off because I'm just going to take a saw. I'm just going to cut those off flush. And once I cut those off, then I'll start doing the next part. Alright, now for the next part, what I do is I take a 2x4 and I just cut them into essentially these little 45-degree wedges. What I do is obviously on the side that's attached to the thing, you have to go from the top side. So I just pre-drill, screw it down, you know, like everything else. I put a little caulking underneath of them just so when the caulking dries, just that extra, you know, barrier just to kind of help bond everything together. And then what I do is I've already measured this out. Like I said, I want mine to be 2 foot deep, so it's going to be from this point back is 2 feet. So I've already measured from here to here, and I need 18.5 to create my. So I cut these pieces right here. They're going to go on next right here. I'm going to screw them right through the side, and then after I get these on, then I'll take more of my little 45-degree wedges. Those will get screwed to these, and then that piece right there will sit directly right on top of it. I'll put screws in that, and then that'll anchor the entire thing together. And then I'll do my my house wrap after that, and that's what I use for the sides, so it still keeps it lightweight and helps keep costs down. Okay, I'm at this stage. I don't really feel like, you know, making the part where I'm screwing it together. I mean, we've all seen people screw wood together, but see where I just put the things in the corner. I have a screw on this side, and then I did one screw up here, and then I did a screw down here at an angle. I sort of split that one a little bit, but it's still holding. Same here, I got these screws, and I got these screws, and what this does, you can see, it's just, it makes the thing nice and rigid, because these right here are going to kind of hold it kind of square in each one of the corners, so it kind of locks the entire thing together. And I put a brace in the middle, and then I got the 3 on the top. The next step is to do essentially the roof and the wrap part. I'm going to show you what I use for that. Now what I use for my sides and all that is this house wrap I found. And I kind of like it because it does have kind of like a blockwork kind of look on it. But the problem with that, like on some of the other props I had to do, is you have to do it sideways. Obviously, so it has to go this way. So since this prop is, you know, to my sides is about 4 feet, but I have to have an overlap, it's probably going to go from the bottom and stop at a certain point right here, and I have to overlap it again. But I'm kind of going with the, you know, like the smooth look on this. So I'm literally just going to take this and just go literally right over the top and right down the other side, staple it onto the thing. I'm going to let it come all the way out to this point here. I'm going to put a little bead of caulk right here, so this way I can hide this edge, so it cleans all this up. And then once that's all dry, then I'll be ready to paint the prop. And at that point, it will pretty much be about complete. Okay, at this point right here, you see where I just took that house wrap, I just wrapped it completely around the whole thing, stapled it on. I'm gonna put more staples in it right now. Just got it, you know, mainly just the corners. Now, what I did with mine last year to help keep like the wind and rain from knocking them over is I took some little eye bolts. You know, I just screwed them into these upper ones right here. I got one of those little augers that you see for dog leashes. I just ran it in the ground right in the middle, and I just took some of that nylon string and just made like a V where I tied it to the loop, went down here and came back up, tied it nice and tight. And that actually kept it where even when we had some pretty good windstorms, I didn't have to worry about them blowing over. And then, you know, this house wrap is, you know, meant for, you know, to help keep water off, you know, the wood framing of a house before they do the siding. So it'll help keep the inside of that dry. So say like you made one where, say this front was open right here and you had a prop in there, it'll help keep your prop dry. You know, and if you take some more of that house wrap, you can always make a, you know, a flap for the back where you can just make a piece that, you know, goes on here. So after you put all your stuff in there, you just finish stapling it on there, and it'll actually help keep your props dry, you know, from getting wet or damaged during rainstorms, during your display, depending on how long you run your display. So right now I just got to let all the caulking dry, put a few more staples in it, and then I'll be ready to start doing the painting portion. Alright, I'm pretty much ready for paint. Now what I did on the top here is, even though I wrapped the house wrap all the way around, I like my roofs to look a lot more solid, not just this. You know, this is fine for the side, but I like my tops to look a little more solid. So you can see I added some extra to the top, and I went ahead and, even though I wasn't going to, I went ahead and did the little detail just to kind of show you, you know, just adding those little bevel strips, how it really kind of changes the look. You know, it gives it like a nice little profile, kind of almost like a crown or like a cove, you know, style around the you know, the top sections here. I also did it on this part right here, so it kind of softens it up as it reaches the brick and all that. So I'm pretty much at the point now where I'm ready for paint. All right, go ahead and get it ready for the painting. Number one, if you're spraying any styrofoams, unless you have already put like a dry lock on there, or you have something that's already on there that's protecting the styrofoam, you can't use aerosol cans. The thinners that are in aerosol cans will melt your styrofoam, and it'll mess up your finish. I mean, depending on the finish you're looking for. So you always want to use regular latex house paints. It can be indoor, outdoor. That doesn't really matter. What I use to paint mine is I use these you know, cheap spray guns. You get them right over Harbor Freight. The reason I like them is you can spray these with a pancake air compressor. You can paint them with a large air compressor, doesn't matter. The other thing I like about them is you can actually, you know, you can feather your trigger. So you'll hear the air coming out, but you can minimize the amount of actual material that's coming out. So when you're doing like your areas where you're gonna make like, where it looks like water has ran down the face of it, and it's just going to be just a thin little black line, or, you know, whatever it's going to be, you know, you can actually do that with these guns by just feathering it out. If you need a little more paint, you just squeeze a little further. So I do like these. So, but the one thing you definitely always got to do is, whenever you're doing any paint, always put a strainer, run your paint through a strainer. You know, it's a little cuppy stick in there, just because, you know, the holes in these things are very small. And if you have like an old paint can, say a paint can from last season, you know, and you know, you get like a little hard spot in there. If you just put it straight in there without doing a strainer, and that hard piece gets down inside here into this section of the gun, you gotta plug that hole up. Doesn't spray. Now you gotta empty the paint out of it, clean it, tear it all apart, get that junk out of there, and you just gotta start all over. So just to save yourself the aggravation, always use a strainer, you know, before you put your paint in these guns. Now on the paint, just regular old house paint. Obviously you don't want to take the paint directly from your can straight to your gun because it's really thick. It'll still spray, but it just doesn't spray as nice. So I usually just take some water, I'll pour some water into the thing, and then just mix it up. You know, you don't want it like water, but you definitely want it to where, you know, it just seems a little runny. That's what will allow it to spray better. So let me finish getting this stirred up. I'll get it in the gun, and we'll go ahead and start getting our first layer of paint on. Okay, I'm going to put the first coat of gray paint on it, and then I'm going to show you how I do my stone look. Now the way I do my stoning is a lot of people use the dry lock, but that gets pretty expensive when you're building a lot of properties. If you're only building one, it's great, but like if I'm building multiples, what I do is I'll either take like a mortar mix for tile or like the grout for tile, and I get the prop nice and wet. Like you see, like it's really wet. It's actually running in a few spots, which is fine because when I throw the stuff on there, that's just going to add more character to it. And I just literally just throw the stuff on it, and then when it dries, it gives it a nice stone feel to it. And then I put another coat of gray on it to seal that, and I can do my other colors. use a leaf blower or the blowgun from my air compressor to blow off any of the excess. You know, try not to get it, you know, blow too much off, and then there'll be a second coat of the paint on it. Alright, I'm going to put my second coat of gray on there. Alright, now to paint the brick. Now you'll notice that when I painted it, you know, I painted the whole thing with the gray. The reason I do that is because, you know, on normal brick, you know, inside the joints you have your mortar, and your mortar is usually a gray color anyways. So to sit there and paint all the brick first and then try to paint all your lines after the fact is a lot harder than if you just paint everything first. Now you can paint it with two ways. You can use a brush or you can use a roller, and you can just roll it, because really all you do is paint just the high points. But I kind of like to use a brush because it allows areas like in between, like these little divots and stuff like that, to maybe keep a little bit of like just a gray color, you know. And now most, you know, a lot of bricks, some have a lot of inconsistency, especially the old bricks. Some of them were very, you know, very consistent in their color. Some of them might have had, you know, little inconsistencies in their color depending on how they were done. So I like to use just a regular brush and just kind of just go right over the top of them. Biggest thing is try not to get too much paint on your brush at one time, so you don't get any that wants to get in the groove. If you get some in the groove, don't sweat it too much. What little bit you're going to get in there is not going to like make a huge deal. See where I got a little bit of paint on the side here, so I just have a little bit of gray out of that same jug I got this stuff from. I just do a little touch up here. Now obviously as the stuff starts to dry, it'll all blend in again. Now that we're past the two boring parts of this, now this is the part where you start to use your artistry, you know, your creativity in creating the look of aging, weathering, that kind of stuff. I start off with black, then I'll use greens, and then I'll use browns. One thing I was talking about was, you know, I could feather my trigger. I want to make like a water run right here. I'm going to adjust my pressure a little bit. A run. I want to make sure this color. I can splat it like that, which that's kind of smear some of that off there. Yeah. A little carried away there. part's going to be the green. Now, I like to, when I'm doing this, I like to think about areas where water is going to collect or sit, and that's where I tend to put a lot of my greens, or areas where water would say have splashed up, because you know, concrete is porous, so it tends to hold the moisture in those areas, and that's where I do a lot of my greens. And here's a little trick that I do is sometimes I'll turn my pressure way down, so when I'm actually, and then I open my fan up, and when I'm spraying it, it won't atomize as much, and it almost kind of like spits the paint out, which gives you like little areas of like, maybe like little concentrated spots. After I do a little bit, I'll get a close up and show you what I mean. See if I can get to where you can see, like kind of up above here. See the there's like dots. You know, instead of it being just like a nice paint, it gives it areas of more of a concentrated. You're gonna get a little more. There we go. See where it's shows like a heavy concentration right on the edges there. That's a little thing I do to kind of give certain areas a little more, like those areas have a lot more water or dew or condensation that builds up in those particular areas. Alright, the last part is the brown. The brown is what kind of gives it the look of like where, like the dirt, you know, and, you know, maybe pollen and stuff like that might have collected. And it, you know, like if you look at something that's old, it always has like a rusty, dirty kind of thing on certain edges. Now I'm out of brown in my regular latex paint, but since I have so much paint on this already now, that using a spray can is not going to hurt it because all the foam is now protected. So I'm going to end up using a spray can. I'm just going to use just a Rust-Oleum, just like a brown primer, which looks pretty good for this. You know, and if you feel that you got a little too heavy in certain areas, you could always get yourself, like I said, now that everything's protected, you could always get yourself a can of, you know, green and a can of black, you know, for like areas where I think I got a little too straight away here. You just lighten it up a little bit. Alright, here we go. I'm going to consider this to be done. Now that last portion of the video with the painting and the aging, there's no real right or wrong way to do that portion. It's more or less entirely up to what's going to look best for you, what you're going for, what your actual theme is for your display, if it's, you know, an old style cemetery or a much newer style cemetery. So that's you know, it's entirely what's going to look best to you on how you're going to want to do your painting. I like to make everything look a little more on the old rustic side, you know, so I kind of tend to go this route more. And don't be afraid to put paint on these things, because you're not really putting like a large, heavy, you know, thing of paint on these things. You're more or less doing a lot of misting and stuff like that. So even though it looks heavy right now, it will fade, and it'll still look good after it sits out in the sun for a week. So don't be afraid to put paint on these things. But the reason for this video was to kind of show what you could make and what you can make out of very easily to get a hold of items from like your local hardware stores to Walmart's, dollar stores and stuff like that. And that it's actually a very easy process to build. You can take one of these and a couple of nights after work, build a structure, and then one day on a sunny day get it all painted. So this is not something that takes a long time to build, and it's very easy to build, and it's very inexpensive. The way I build mine, I've tried to find the most inexpensive way to build stuff like this as possible, because a lot of times I'm building a large quantity of them. I'm usually a lot of times building 4 or more of these things. So, you know, I try to keep the cost down as much as possible. So that's why I wanted to share this video. You know, hopefully the information in this video, you know, gives you the confidence to take on a project like this and to build something really cool and really unique for your next Halloween display. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification button so you get notified on the next video. Drop me a comment, tell me what you think of this one. If you have any requests, something that you might want me to try to build to show how I make them, I'll try to make a video of that. And once again, I'd like to thank all my subscribers and everybody that watches my videos, and